The mockery begins. The cold silence of space stretched out endlessly, broken only by the gleaming shapes of the Zorak Armada. Their ships were monstrous, sleek, black, and humming with deadly energy. The Zorak were an ancient race, conquerors of dozens of worlds, and now they had turned their attention to a small, insignificant planet called Earth. Across their fleet, laughter echoed through communication channels. Their target was not a fleet, not an army, just one single ship. But this wasn't a ship to fear, not in their eyes. It was a patched-together, rusty bucket of bolts barely holding itself together. The humans had sent what the Zorak called a scrap ship. On board the flagship of the Zorak, Commander Thal Rak watched the human vessel appear on his screen. It looked pathetic, floating awkwardly against the black backdrop of space. He sneered, his sharp teeth glinting under the dim lights of the bridge. "This is their defense," Thal Rak said, his voice dripping with disdain. "They send us garbage." The officers around him chuckled, their laughter cold and cruel. They broadcast their message across the galaxy, letting every race hear their mockery. "Humans," Thal Rak's voice boomed through space, "you think this pile of scrap can challenge the Zorak Armada? We will melt it down and send the remains back to your planet as a gift." But on the scrap ship, there was no fear. Captain Elias Voss stood at the center of the cramped bridge, his arms crossed and a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The ship groaned and creaked around him, every panel showing signs of wear and tear. But Voss knew something the Zorak didn't. "They're laughing at us," Lieutenant Kara Briggs muttered, glaring at the screen. The alien commander's face, twisted in amusement, filled their view. "Let them," Voss replied calmly. His eyes stayed fixed on the enemy fleet. "They'll stop laughing soon enough." The crew exchanged nervous glances. They all knew the truth. The scrap ship wasn't just a rusting wreck. Beneath its battered surface was something new, something Earth had never dared to use before. It was powered by an untested energy source, dark matter fusion. The technology was unstable, dangerous. If it worked, it could change everything. If it didn't, the ship would explode before it even fired a shot. "Captain," Kara whispered, "are we really ready for this?" Voss finally turned to face his crew. They were a small team, just 10 of them, hand-picked for this mission. Each one had left behind families, friends, and lives back on Earth. They all knew this could be a one-way trip. "Ready or not," Voss said, his voice steady, "it doesn't matter. We're the only line between Earth and them." The crew nodded, determination replacing fear in their eyes. They had trained for this. They believed in their mission. But even so, as the Zorak Armada's massive ships loomed closer, the weight of what they faced pressed down on them. Back on the Zorak flagship, Commander Thal Rak leaned back in his chair, his claws tapping lazily on the armrest. "Open fire," he ordered casually. "Let's see how long their little toy lasts." A bright beam shot out from one of the Zorak warships, heading straight for the scrap ship. The crew braced for impact, but instead of being torn apart, the ship's specially designed shields absorbed the blast. The entire vessel shook violently, but it held. "Shields at 60%, Captain," Ensign Malik reported, his voice tight. Voss didn't hesitate. "Target their lid ship. Fire the dark matter cannon." The crew moved quickly, their hands flying over controls. The ship's weapon systems powered up with a deep, rumbling hum that echoed through the metal walls. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The moment humanity would show it wasn't as weak as the Zorak believed. The scrap ship fired. A beam of pure dark energy burst from the cannon, slicing through space like a knife through paper. It struck the Zorak scout ship head-on. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alien vessel disintegrated, vanishing into nothingness as if it had never existed. Silence followed. The laughter from the Zorak fleet stopped abruptly. On their flagship, Commander Thal Rak stared at the empty space where his scout ship had been. What was that?" he hissed, his amusement gone, replaced by confusion, and a growing sense of fear. On board the scrap ship, the crew watched the enemy fleet's stunned reaction. "I think they're not laughing anymore," Kara said with a grin. Voss allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Let's show them what this scrap can really do." The battle was just beginning, but the message was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The Zorak had mocked Earth's scrap ship, but now they faced the terrifying truth. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The secret weapon. The Zorak armada's laughter had turned into stunned silence, but the battle was far from over. As the remains of the disintegrated scout ship floated in the void, the rest of the alien fleet began to stir, their arrogance replaced by a growing sense of unease. The scrap ship had done the impossible, and now the Zorak knew they faced something far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. On board the scrap ship, the crew felt the tension shift. The first shot had been fired, and it had struck fear into the heart of the enemy. But Captain Elias Voss knew better than to celebrate too soon. The true test was yet to come. "Status report," Voss ordered, his eyes never leaving the massive enemy ships looming in the distance. "Shields holding at 55%, Captain," Ensign Malik responded, his fingers flying over the controls. "Dark matter cannon recharging. Estimated time to full power, 5 minutes." Voss nodded. 5 minutes could feel like an eternity in a battle like this. Meanwhile, on the Zorak flagship, Commander Thalrak's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. The destruction of his scout ship had been swift and absolute, something he had never witnessed before. His pride wounded, Thalrak snarled, his sharp teeth bared in fury. "They think one lucky shot will save them," he hissed. "All ships prepare to fire. I want that human vessel destroyed." The Zorak fleet sprang into action. Dozens of warships repositioned themselves, their weapons charging with deadly energy. The scrap ship was small, but now it was a threat that needed to be eliminated. Back on the scrap ship, Lieutenant Kara Briggs monitored the enemy's movements, her brow furrowed. "Captain, they're surrounding us. They're not underestimating us anymore," she reported. "Good," Voss replied, a steely glint in his eyes. "Let them come. They still don't know what this ship can really do." The crew knew exactly what he meant. The scrap ship wasn't just a vessel cobbled together from old parts. Hidden beneath its rusted exterior was Earth's most dangerous and untested technology, the dark matter reactor. It was a prototype, a last-ditch effort to give humanity a fighting chance in a universe dominated by superior alien races. The reactor's power was immense, capable of fueling the dark matter cannon and the ship's advanced shielding system. But it was also unstable. The slightest miscalculation could result in the ship's complete destruction. "Engineering," Voss called into the comms. "How's the reactor holding up?" Chief Engineer Anya Lee's voice crackled through the speakers. "Holding steady for now, Captain, but the power fluctuations are getting worse. We're pushing this thing to its limits." "Keep it together, Anya. We need every second," Voss replied. As the Zorak ships closed in, the scrap ship moved with surprising agility. Its patched-together hull hid advanced thrusters that allowed it to dart and weave through space like a predator lying in wait. The crew executed evasive maneuvers with precision, avoiding the barrage of energy blasts fired by the alien fleet. But the Zorak were relentless. A particularly powerful shot struck the ship's side, sending a violent shudder through the entire vessel. "Hull integrity at 80%, Malik reported, gritting his teeth. "We can't take too many more hits like that," Kara muttered. Voss knew she was right. They needed to turn the tide. And fast. "How long until the cannon is ready?" he asked. 2 minutes, Malik replied. "We don't have 2 minutes," Voss said grimly. "Prepare to divert power from non-essential systems to the reactor. We need that cannon online now." The crew moved swiftly, rerouting energy from life support, lighting, and even communication systems. The ship dimmed, the hum of the reactor growing louder, more intense. In the engineering bay, Anya Lee monitored the reactor's readings, sweat dripping down her forehead. The power levels were spiking dangerously high. "Captain, if we push it any further, we risk a meltdown," she warned. Voss's voice came through the comms, calm and unwavering. "Do it, Anya. This is our only shot." Taking a deep breath, Anya made the final adjustments. The reactor roared to life, sending a surge of dark energy coursing through the ship. The dark matter cannon glowed with an eerie, almost malevolent light. "Cannon at full power," Malik announced. Voss didn't hesitate. "Target their command ship. Fire." The scrap ship unleashed another beam of dark energy, this one even more powerful than the first. It streaked through space, cutting through the Zorak warships like a hot knife through butter. The beam struck the Zorak flagship, and for a moment, everything went still. Then, the flagship exploded in a brilliant burst of light and debris, sending shockwaves rippling through the fleet. The Zorak Armada's command structure had been decapitated in a single devastating blow. On the scrap ship, the crew watched in awe as the once mighty fleet faltered. "We did it," Kara whispered, disbelief in her voice. But Voss knew better. "It's not over yet," he said quietly. "They'll regroup, and when they do, we'll be ready." The scrap ship had revealed its secret weapon, but the battle was far from over. The Zorak were wounded, but they were not defeated. And now, they were angrier than ever. The first clash. The aftermath of the Zorak flagship's destruction rippled through space like a shockwave. Debris floated silently, the remnants of a once mighty vessel now reduced to cosmic dust. But the battle was far from over. The Zorak Armada, though shaken, was vast and ruthless. Their pride had been wounded, and now they were out for blood. On the scrap ship, the crew had little time to celebrate their victory. The destruction of the flagship had bought them a moment of reprieve, but the rest of the fleet was already repositioning. The alien warships, now driven by fury, formed a tight formation, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. Captain Elias Voss stood at the helm, his eyes narrowing as he studied the enemy's movements. The initial shock had given them an advantage, but that wouldn't last. The Zorak were adapting. "They're regrouping faster than I thought," Lieutenant Kara Briggs muttered, her fingers flying over the tactical console. "They're not going to fall for the same trick twice." Voss nodded. "Good. That means we need a new one." The scrap ship wasn't just fast. It was unpredictable. Built from a mishmash of old Earth technology and new experimental systems, it moved in ways the Zorak couldn't anticipate. And now it was time to use that unpredictability to their advantage. "Kara, plot a course into the asteroid field," Voss ordered. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The asteroid field was dense and dangerous, a graveyard for less agile ships. But Voss knew what he was doing. The field would provide cover, forcing the Zorak to split their forces if they wanted to pursue. "If we're going to survive this," Voss said, "we need to make them fight on our terms." The scrap ship pivoted sharply, its engines roaring as it darted toward the looming asteroid field. Behind them, the Zorak fleet hesitated for only a moment before following, their thirst for revenge blinding them to the danger ahead. As the ship weaved through the massive rocks, the crew worked in perfect sync. The asteroids were both a shield and a weapon. Every turn and dive was calculated, using the natural cover to evade enemy fire while positioning themselves for counterattacks. "They're closing in," Ensign Malik reported, his voice tense. "Multiple ships on our tail." "Let them come," Voss replied, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We're leading them exactly where we want them." The first wave of Zorak ships entered the asteroid field, their larger, less maneuverable vessels struggling to keep up. The scrap ship darted between the rocks with ease, but the Zorak weren't so lucky. One by one, their ships collided with asteroids or were forced into vulnerable positions. "Now," Voss commanded. The scrap ship spun around, its dark matter cannon firing precise, deadly shots. The confined space amplified the destruction, each explosion sending shockwaves through the asteroid field. The Zorak ships, unable to escape or regroup, were picked off one by one. But the Zorak were relentless. Even as their ships fell, more poured into the field, determined to crush the human vessel. The scrap ship was powerful, but it couldn't fight forever. "Captain, we're taking damage," Malik reported. "Shields are down to 40%. Voss's mind raced. They needed another advantage, something the Zorak wouldn't expect. "Kara," he said, "find me the biggest asteroid in this field." Kara's eyes widened as she realized what he was planning. "You're not serious." "Dead serious," Voss replied. "We're going to use it as a weapon." Kara quickly scanned the field and pinpointed a massive asteroid, its surface jagged and unstable. "That one," she said, highlighting it on the screen. Voss grinned. "Perfect. Set a course." The scrap ship accelerated toward the asteroid, the Zorak ships in hot pursuit. As they neared the giant rock, Voss gave the final command: "Fire the cannon at the asteroid's weak point." The crew executed the order, and the dark matter cannon unleashed its deadly energy. The asteroid shuddered, cracks spider webbing across its surface. Moments later, it exploded, sending massive chunks of debris hurtling in every direction. The Zorak ships were caught in the chaos. Unable to maneuver in time, they were battered and destroyed by the asteroid fragments. The scrap ship, having anticipated the blast, had already darted to safety. For a brief moment, the battlefield was silent. The scrap ship floated among the wreckage, its crew exhausted but alive. "We did it," Kara whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Voss didn't relax. He knew this was just the beginning. The Zorak armada was vast, and they wouldn't give up so easily. But for now, humanity had struck a blow that would be remembered across the galaxy. "This is only the first clash," Voss said quietly. "The real war is just beginning." The scrap ship powered up its engines and disappeared into the stars, ready for whatever came next. The trap is set. The scrap ship glided silently through the remnants of the asteroid field, its hull battered but intact. The crew moved with quiet efficiency, each person aware that their brief victory had only bought them time. The Zorak armada was still out there, and they would return with more ships, more firepower, and a renewed thirst for vengeance. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the surrounding star systems. The asteroid field had served its purpose, but they couldn't rely on luck and guerrilla tactics forever. It was time to change the game. "Kara," Voss said, turning to Lieutenant Briggs, "I need options. Where can we lead them that gives us the upper hand?" Kara tapped into the ship's navigational systems, scanning for anything they could use. After a few tense moments, she pointed to a nearby system. "Here," she said, highlighting a small, dying star surrounded by dense debris from ancient battles. "It's called the Graveyard Belt. The radiation from the star messes with sensors, and the debris field is even thicker than the asteroid field." Voss nodded thoughtfully. "Perfect. We'll lure them in and make it impossible for them to coordinate." The crew got to work, plotting a course to the Graveyard Belt. The plan was risky, but risk was something they had become very familiar with. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the remaining Zorak fleet was regrouping. The loss of their flagship and several warships had stunned them, but their pride burned hotter than ever. On board the new command ship, Sub-Commander Jorvac snarled at the reports coming in. "A human vessel did this," he growled, his claws flexing in frustration. "We will tear them apart piece by piece." The Zorak were relentless, and soon they were on the trail of the scrap ship once more. Their scanners picked up the faint energy signature of the human vessel heading toward the Graveyard Belt. Jorvac grinned, thinking the humans were running. "Fools," he muttered. "They think they can hide." But hiding was the last thing on Captain Voss's mind. As the scrap ship entered the Graveyard Belt, The crew immediately felt the oppressive weight of the dying star's radiation. The ship's systems flickered and strained. But the crew had prepared for this. All systems stable, Ensign Malik reported. Radiation levels manageable, but communications will be spotty. Good, Voss replied. That means it'll be worse for them. The plan was simple. Use the dense debris and radiation interference to split the Zorak fleet. Without clear communication, the alien ships would be forced to fight isolated skirmishes, unable to regroup or coordinate effectively. Deploy the drones, Voss ordered. Small, stealthy drones were launched from the scrap ship, each programmed to emit false signals and create confusion. The drones darted through the debris, mimicking the ship's energy signature and drawing the Zorak ships deeper into the trap. Minutes later, the Zorak fleet arrived, their ships slicing through the darkness like predators hunting their prey. But as they moved deeper into the graveyard belt, their formations began to falter. The radiation scrambled their sensors, and the debris forced them to spread out. On the Zorak command ship, Jorvak's frustration grew. "Where are they?" he barked. "Find that human ship." But every signal they chased led to a dead end. A drone, a fragment of debris, or nothing at all. Back on the scrap ship, the crew watched the chaos unfold on their limited scanners. "They're falling for it," Kara whispered, a hint of disbelief in her voice. Voss allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "Now we pick them off one by one." The scrap ship moved like a ghost through the debris, striking from the shadows. Each shot from the dark matter cannon was precise, eliminating isolated Zorak ships before they could call for help. The crew worked in perfect harmony, their fear replaced by the thrill of turning the tables on their powerful enemy. But the Zorak were not fools. Sub-Commander Jorvak, though enraged, was a seasoned strategist. He soon realized the pattern in the attacks and devised a counter-strategy. "Regroup at the star's magnetic pole," he commanded. "Use the radiation to mask our signals and bait them in." The Zorak ships began to converge, using the dying star's unique properties to their advantage. Voss noticed the shift in their tactics almost immediately. "They're adapting," Kara said, her brow furrowed. "We won't be able to pick them off like before." Voss nodded. "Then it's time for the final phase." The scrap ship accelerated, heading straight for the magnetic pole where the Zorak were regrouping. It was a bold move, one that seemed reckless, exactly what Voss wanted the Zorak to think. As they neared the Zorak formation, Voss gave the final order. "Prepare the reactor for overload," he said quietly. The crew stared at him in shock. "Captain, if we do that," Malik began, but Voss cut him off. "If we don't, they'll regroup and wipe out Earth," Voss said firmly. "This is our chance to end it." The crew nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They had come this far, and they weren't about to back down now. As the scrap ship dove into the heart of the Zorak fleet, the dark matter reactor began to pulse with unstable energy. The ship became a ticking time bomb, its very presence a threat to everything around it. The Zorak ships opened fire, but it was too late. The scrap ship was already in position. "Detonate on my mark," Voss said, his voice calm. The screen went white as the reactor reached critical mass, and for a moment, it seemed as if the entire graveyard belt had been swallowed by light. Silence followed the explosion. The fate of the scrap ship and its crew hung in the balance, but one thing was certain. The Zorak armada would never recover from this blow. The turning point. Silence. It was the kind that felt heavy, like the vacuum of space itself had swallowed every sound. The graveyard belt, moments ago a chaotic battlefield, was now eerily still. The bright explosion from the scrap ship's overloaded reactor had faded, leaving behind a field of smoldering debris and fractured Zorak vessels. The once mighty armada now drifted, broken and leaderless. But amidst the silence, a faint signal crackled to life. "This is the scrap ship." On board Earth's orbital command station, The room erupted into shouts and hurried movements as the faint transmission was detected. Commander Reyes, the head of Earth's defense forces, leaned forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Patch it through," she barked. The scrambled feed stabilized just enough to reveal the bruised, exhausted face of Captain Elias Voss. Behind him, sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the dim emergency lights cast eerie shadows over the crew. They were alive, but barely. "Mission not over yet," Voss's voice crackled through the static. "We took out most of their fleet, but they're regrouping. We need to finish this." The screen flickered and went dark, but the message was clear. The scrap ship had survived, but so had the Zorak, and they were rallying for one final assault. Back in the wreckage of the graveyard belt, the scrap ship floated like a wounded predator. The dark matter reactor was damaged beyond repair, its unstable energy now a ticking time bomb within the ship's core. The crew knew they were on borrowed time. "Hull integrity at 25%, Captain," Ensign Malik reported, his voice hoarse. "We've got maybe an hour before the reactor breaches completely." Lieutenant Kara Briggs looked over at Voss, her face pale but determined. "We need a plan, Captain. If we're going down, we're taking them with us." Voss nodded, his mind racing. They had dealt a critical blow to the Zorak, but the alien fleet's remnants were regrouping faster than expected. There wasn't enough time to return to Earth or call for reinforcements. It was up to them to finish the job. "We're going to use the reactor," Voss said finally, his voice steady. "We'll lure them in for a final confrontation, then detonate the core. The blast will wipe out the rest of their fleet." The crew fell silent, each person processing the weight of what he was saying. It was a suicide mission, but they had known that from the start. "If anyone wants to back out, now's the time," Voss added quietly. No one moved. "We're with you, Captain," Kara said, speaking for them all. The plan was set in motion. The scrap ship broadcast a distress signal, faking severe damage and a desperate retreat. The Zorak, still seething from their losses, took the bait. Their remaining ships closed in, believing they were about to crush the last human resistance. On board the Zorak flagship, Sub-Commander Jorvac snarled at the sight of the limping human vessel. "End this," he ordered, his voice a low growl. "I want their ship torn apart piece by piece." But as the Zorak fleet moved in for the kill, something unexpected happened. The scrap ship suddenly accelerated, its thrusters blazing with the last reserves of power. It dove straight into the heart of the enemy formation, weaving through the alien ships with reckless precision. "What are they doing?" Jorvac hissed, leaning forward as the human ship barreled toward his command vessel. On board the scrap ship, Voss gave his final order: "Initiate reactor detonation sequence." Chief Engineer Anya Lee worked quickly, her fingers trembling as she input the commands. The reactor's unstable energy surged, the ship trembling as it prepared to unleash its final devastating attack. But just as the countdown began, an alarm blared across the bridge. "Captain," Malik shouted, "incoming transmission from Earth." The crew froze. "Earth? Now?" Voss hesitated, then nodded. "Put it through." The face of Commander Reyes appeared on the cracked display, her expression urgent. "Captain Voss, we've detected a weakness in their fleet's formation," she said quickly. "If you can hold off detonation, we can send reinforcements to flank them. You don't have to die out there." The crew exchanged stunned glances. A sliver of hope had appeared, but it came with a risk. The reactor was unstable. Delaying detonation could mean the ship exploding before they achieved their goal. Voss's mind raced. They had fought so hard, come so far. Could they survive this? "Captain," Kara said softly, "what do we do?" Voss stared at the screen, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The fate of Earth, his crew, and even himself balanced on this moment. Finally, he spoke. "Hold the detonation," he said firmly. "Let's give Earth a fighting chance." The scrap ship shifted tactics, focusing on evasion and defense as they awaited reinforcements. The Zorak, confused by the sudden change, hesitated, and that hesitation was all Earth's fleet needed. Moments later, Earth's reinforcements burst into the battlefield, flanking the Zorak from both sides. The combined assault caught the aliens off guard, their ships falling in rapid succession. On board the scrap ship, the crew watched in awe as the tide of battle turned in their favor. "We're going to make it," Malik whispered, disbelief in his voice. But just as victory seemed certain, the reactor's alarms blared louder than ever. "Captain," Anya shouted, "the reactor's going critical. We can't stop it." Voss's heart pounded. They had delayed as long as they could. Now it was time to finish what they started. "Prepare for emergency evacuation," Voss ordered. "We're not dying today." The crew scrambled to the escape pods, launching just as the scrap ship reached the final moments of its countdown. As they drifted away, they watched their ship, their home, explode in a brilliant burst of light, taking the last of the Zorak fleet with it. Silence returned to the battlefield, but this time it was the silence of victory. The scrap ship had turned the tide, and humanity had survived to tell the tale. The final blow. The remnants of the Zorak armada drifted aimlessly in the void, their mighty fleet reduced to scattered debris and smoldering wrecks. But even in the face of overwhelming defeat, the Zorak's thirst for vengeance had not been extinguished. A single warship, larger and more menacing than any they had encountered before, emerged from the shadows. The Zorak dreadnought, a vessel designed for one purpose: total annihilation. From their escape pods, Captain Elias Voss and his crew watched in horror as the monstrous ship loomed over the battlefield, its weapons glowing with a menacing red hue. The scrap ship was gone, but the fight was not over. They'd brought a dreadnought, Lieutenant Kara Briggs whispered, her voice trembling. "We're sitting ducks out here." Voss clenched his jaw, his mind racing. The reinforcements from Earth had helped, but they weren't equipped to handle something of this magnitude. The Zorak dreadnought was a symbol of the alien empire's might, and a final challenge to humanity's survival. The escape pods drifted closer to Earth's fleet, where Commander Rice coordinated the defense from her flagship, the ESS Horizon. "Voss, do you read me?" Her voice crackled through the pod's comms. Loud and clear, "Commander," Voss replied, his eyes still on the dreadnought. "We're out of options. That thing will tear through our fleet." Rice nodded grimly. "We're prepping our ships, but we'll never punch through its shields in time." Voss's eyes narrowed as a thought took shape in his mind. The scrap ship may have been destroyed, but its core, the unstable dark matter reactor, was still a factor. The explosion had scattered its fragments across the battlefield. If they could harness the residual energy, they might have a chance. "Commander," Voss said urgently, "the reactor fragments. We can use them." Reyes's eyes widened as she realized his plan. "You want to weaponize the debris." "Exactly," Voss confirmed. "But we'll need to get close. Real close." Reyes hesitated for a brief moment, then nodded. "You're the best we've got, Voss. Get it done." The escape pods were quickly retrieved by Earth's ships, and Voss and his crew were rushed to the ESS Horizon. There was no time to rest. They immediately got to work, retrofitting one of Earth's smaller, more agile vessels with a magnetic tow system designed to collect the volatile reactor fragments. The new ship, hastily named the Phoenix, was their last hope. It was faster and sleeker than the scrap ship, but it lacked the heavy armor. One wrong move, and they would be vaporized. As the Phoenix launched, Voss felt a strange mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. They had survived the impossible once, but now they had to do it again. The Phoenix darted through the debris field, its magnetic claws pulling in the unstable reactor fragments. Each piece glowed with a dark, pulsing energy, and the crew worked carefully to stabilize them just enough to prevent premature detonation. "We've got enough," Chief Engineer Anya Lee reported, her hands steady despite the tension. but I don't know how long we can keep them stable. Long enough, Voss replied, his eyes fixed on the looming dreadnought. The plan was simple, but execution would be anything but. They would fly directly at the dreadnought, weaving through its defenses, and release the reactor fragments at its core. The resulting chain reaction would, hopefully, be enough to destroy it. "Brace yourselves," Voss said, gripping the controls. "This is it." The Phoenix accelerated, a streak of defiance against the backdrop of the cold void. The Zorak dreadnought's weapons locked on almost immediately, and beams of searing energy shot toward them. The crew maneuvered with precision, dodging blasts by mere meters. "Shields at 30%, Malik called out. "We won't survive another hit." But Voss didn't slow down. The dreadnought loomed larger and larger until it filled the entire viewport. "Now," Voss shouted. Anya released the magnetic clamps, sending the reactor fragments hurtling toward the dreadnought's core. For a brief, terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, the fragments ignited. A brilliant, cascading explosion tore through the Zorak dreadnought, ripping it apart from the inside. The shockwave sent the Phoenix spiraling out of control, but Voss managed to stabilize the ship just as the wreckage of the dreadnought began to drift apart, consumed by the dark energy. The battlefield fell silent once more. The mighty Zorak dreadnought was no more. On board the Phoenix, the crew sat in stunned silence, the weight of what they had accomplished settling over them. We did it," Kara whispered, her voice barely audible. Voss allowed himself a rare smile. "Yeah, we did." The comms crackled to life, and Commander Rice's voice came through, filled with relief and pride. "Voss, you've just saved humanity." "Again," she said. "Get your crew home. You've earned it." As the Phoenix turned toward Earth, leaving the ruins of the Zorak Armada behind, Voss couldn't help but reflect on everything they had endured. They had been mocked, underestimated, and pushed to the brink, but they had proven, beyond any doubt, that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. And this time, no one would dare laugh at Earth's scrap ship again. The aftermath. The Phoenix cut through the quiet of space, its hull scorched and systems strained but intact. Earth's blue marble shimmered in the distance, a beacon of hope after the harrowing battle. The crew sat in silence, each person lost in their thoughts as the magnitude of what they had achieved began to sink in. They had faced the impossible and survived. But at a great cost. Captain Elias Voss leaned back in his seat, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. The adrenaline that had kept him sharp was now fading, leaving only the bone-deep weariness of a man who had fought too many battles. Yet despite the fatigue, there was a flicker of something else in his chest. Pride. Not just for himself, but for his crew, for Earth, and for the resilience of humanity. Approaching Earth's atmosphere, Ensign Malik announced, his voice hoarse but steady. The comms crackled, and Commander Rice's voice filled the cabin. "Phoenix, you are cleared for re-entry. Welcome home." The words hit Voss harder than any enemy fire ever could. Home. A simple word, but one that carried the weight of everything they had fought for. As the Phoenix descended, Earth's fleet moved to escort them, a formation of ships that had once seemed fragile compared to the Zorak Armada, but now stood as a symbol of defiance and victory. Cities across the planet prepared to welcome their heroes, but Voss and his crew knew that their journey wasn't just about recognition. It was about survival, about proving that even the smallest, most underestimated force could change the course of history. The Phoenix touched down at Orbital Command Station Alpha, where crowds of people gathered, cheering and waving banners. The crew disembarked to a hero's welcome, but their smiles were bittersweet. They had survived, but many had not. The faces of fallen comrades lingered in their minds, their sacrifices etched into every step. They took on solid ground. Lieutenant Kara Briggs walked beside Voss, her usually sharp eyes softened by emotion. "I still can't believe we made it," she murmured. Voss gave a small nod. "Neither can I. But we did. And now the galaxy knows who we are. A ceremony was held in their honor, where Commander Rice presented them with medals of valor. The crowd's cheers echoed through the station, but Voss's mind drifted to the stars beyond, and the challenges that might still lurk in the shadows. As the ceremony ended, Rice pulled Voss aside. "We've received transmissions from other systems," she said quietly. "The Zorak weren't the only ones watching. There are other empires out there, and now they know Earth is a force to be reckoned with." Voss's expression hardened. "Let them come. We'll be ready." But readiness came with a price. The scrap ship had been humanity's gamble, a desperate attempt to level the playing field. Now, Earth had proven its strength, but it had also painted a target on itself. Weeks passed, and life on Earth began to settle into a new rhythm. The story of the scrap ship and the Phoenix spread across the planet, becoming symbols of human resilience and ingenuity. Schools taught about the battle, artists created works in honor of the crew, and leaders across the world pledged to strengthen Earth's defenses. But for Voss and his crew, the quiet was temporary. They knew that peace in the galaxy was fragile. They had seen the face of annihilation and had stared it down, but they also knew that new threats would emerge, stronger, smarter, and more relentless. One evening, as Voss stood on a balcony overlooking the city lights of New Geneva, Kara approached him. "You ever think about what's next?" she asked, leaning against the railing. Voss nodded slowly. "Every day." She smiled faintly. "Whatever it is, I'm in." Voss chuckled softly. "I figured you'd say that." As they gazed up at the stars, a new sense of purpose settled over them. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had only begun to find its place among the stars. They had faced the odds and won, but the journey was far from over. In the distance, the faint glimmer of a new ship under construction caught Voss's eye. Sleeker, stronger, and more advanced than anything Earth had ever built. It wasn't a scrap ship, but its spirit was the same: defiance, resilience, and the unyielding will to survive. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Voss whispered the words that had carried them through every battle, every loss, and every victory. "Let them come." Because this time, humanity wasn't just ready. They were unstoppable.